Why are familiar herbs that have been used to treat people for centuries disappearing? Why have mint and chamomile suddenly become dangerous? And who benefits from natural remedies disappearing from the shelves? In this investigation, we will find out who is behind the displacement of nature from medicine, how pharmaceutical monopolies work, and whether it is true that health today is a business rather than a concern. For thousands of years, people have been treating themselves with what nature has provided. Herbs, roots, minerals, and plant decoctions have been the basis of medicine in all civilizations, from the Sumerians to the Slavs, from Chinese emperors to Aztec priests. This knowledge has been passed down through generations, tested in practice, and established in tradition. Ancient Indian Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, Arabic herbal medicine, and European herbalists all testify to a powerful culture of natural healing that existed long before the invention of factory-made pills. And yet today, despite technological progress, natural medicine is being pushed out of the market. It is not just losing popularity. It is becoming subject to regulation, restrictions, and, in some countries, outright bans. Why? Who is waging war on herbs, oils, and tinctures, and why? Why is propolis tincture considered an old wives' remedy rather than an alternative to antibiotics? Why are lavender, yarrow, calendula, and licorice root suddenly considered unsafe? This is not just a cultural change, it is a systemic process. Before our very eyes, everything natural is being slowly but surely pushed out. Natural medicine is presented as quackery, a relic, a risk. But on closer inspection, it turns out that this discrediting is not based on concern for health at all. It is based on the interests of those who make money from selling synthetic drugs. In the 20th century, humanity entered the era of pharmacology. Pharmacy shelves were filled with chemicals, and medicine was filled with treatment protocols based on standardized drugs. It is convenient, predictable, and profitable. After all, every synthetic drug can be patented, its production controlled, and billions earned. Natural remedies cannot be patented. They belong to everyone. This means they threaten the monopoly of the pharmaceutical market. Under pressure from regulators, herbal remedies, herbal teas, and tinctures that were commonplace 20 years ago are increasingly disappearing from store shelves. Warnings appear on packaging, bans appear in pharmacies, and articles about the unproven effectiveness of herbs appear in the news. Sound familiar? This is no coincidence, but a strategy. Scientific commissions, medical protocols, and even media campaigns are being used to discredit natural remedies. Articles with frightening headlines are being circulated about the toxicity of chamomile, the dangers of mint, and the hallucinogenic effects of St. John's wort. Pharmaceutical companies sponsor studies comparing the effects of natural remedies with synthetic analogs, but only under strict methodological control that does not favor nature. Let's recall the recent case of echinacea extract, a natural immunomodulator that has been used for centuries in Europe and America. In the 2000s, it began to be sharply criticized for its unproven effectiveness. Several studies showed that the effect of echinacea was allegedly insignificant. It later emerged that the sample in these studies was artificially limited. The dosage was underestimated, and the funding came in part from manufacturers of synthetic immunomodulators. There are dozens of such cases, and they are not accidental. At stake is a market worth trillions of dollars, and natural medicine, which is patent-free, cheap, and accessible, is a competitor. Therefore, it must be squeezed out. But it is impossible to do this head-on. People have trusted plants for thousands of years, so perceptions must be changed. Herbalists must be portrayed as sorcerers, and phytotherapy as unscientific. A wave of regulations must be introduced that care for us, but, in fact, block natural medicines. This process is accompanied by a change in language. What used to be called medicinal herbs are now dietary supplements. What has been used in medicine for centuries is now alternative medicine, excluded from official practice. And this semantic transformation hides the main conflict. The struggle is not for effectiveness, but for power over the human body. Every year, not only drugs disappear, but also knowledge about them. Young doctors do not study herbal medicine. Pharmacies do not order herbs, and more pseudo-natural supplements appear in online stores, with marketing but no real effect. This is a substitution. But there are still people who remember how to treat without pills. There are herbalists, old-school doctors, naturopaths, and patients who are looking for health, not profit. They pass on their knowledge, write down recipes, and create communities. And as long as they exist, natural medicine is alive. But the pressure is mounting. And the question remains, will nature be able to defend its right to heal? When it comes to the disappearance of medicinal plants, many people imagine environmental problems, deforestation, climate change, loss of biodiversity. But in reality, the main reason for their disappearance is not nature, but people, or rather, laws, markets, and interests. More and more familiar natural remedies are simply disappearing from the shelves, not because their natural source has dried up, but because they are no longer produced, sold, or recognized as legal. One of the most striking examples is St. John's wort. This herb has been used for centuries as a natural antidepressant. Its effectiveness has been confirmed by numerous studies, especially in the treatment of mild depression and anxiety. But since the late 1990s, St. John's wort has been systematically pushed out of the market. Under the pretext of dangerous interactions with other drugs, doctors stopped recommending it. Pharmacies removed it from sale, and pharmaceutical companies launched campaigns against its use. Why? Because it is cheaper, more accessible, and safer than most prescription antidepressants. A similar story happened with ginkgo biloba, an ancient plant known for its positive effects on memory, concentration, and cerebral circulation. In Europe, ginkgo was actively used in its natural form until a pharmacological extract patented by a large company appeared. From that moment on, natural supplements began to gradually disappear, and only synthetic forms of the extract appeared in protocols. The same thing happened with valerian. It was traditionally used to combat insomnia and anxiety. But then, a wave of warnings began. Possible side effects, unpredictable interaction with alcohol, insufficient standardization. Valerian disappeared from pharmacy shelves, giving way to more expensive sleeping pills and tranquilizers. Many natural remedies did not even have time to gain official recognition. They were blocked at the registration stage. The European Union has a so-called Traditional Herbal Medicinal Products Directive, according to which every remedy must be registered. The problem is that registration costs hundreds of thousands of euros. This means that small companies and herbalists simply cannot afford to enter the market. As a result, the drugs are not formally banned, but they disappear because they become unavailable for legal sale. In the United States, a similar situation arose with Ma Huang, a traditional Chinese plant used to improve breathing and increase energy levels. After a series of scandals related to its abuse in sports supplements, Ma Huang was banned from sale. However, the ban applied to all forms, even those that had been used for centuries in small doses. Instead of dialogue and regulation, there was complete elimination. Sometimes disappearance happens quietly. It is not profitable for manufacturers to produce a drug that cannot be patented. Pharmacies are not interested in buying herbs that are dozens of times cheaper than synthetic analogs. Marketers do not invest in promoting products that cannot generate super profits. All this leads to a situation where only those natural products remain on the market that are packaged as expensive extracts or medical dietary supplements, often with minimal active ingredient content. The financial model of the modern pharmaceutical industry is such that a drug must be not only effective, but also profitable. Natural remedies do not follow this logic. They cannot be monopolized. They can be grown, harvested, and brewed without the involvement of corporations. This means that their existence is a threat to the pharmaceutical monopoly. In addition, there is a professional stigmatization effect. Young doctors who have gone through the classical medical education system do not learn about herbal medicine. In lectures, they are taught about standards, pathogenesis, and protocols, but not about herbs. As a result, even if such remedies were available, they would not be recommended. Doctors are afraid to take responsibility for unconventional prescriptions. Patients are afraid of looking foolish, and pharmacies are afraid of inspections. All this creates an environment in which natural remedies disappear without a fight, imperceptibly, bloodlessly, quietly. And the further we go, the harder it is to pinpoint the moment of their disappearance. We remember them when it's too late, when it turns out that you can no longer buy a simple tincture, that the herbal mixture that your grandmother brewed all her life is no longer available, that even on the internet, it's all marketing and not reality. Sometimes disappearance is accompanied by pseudo-replacement. Instead of the real plant, an extract with an improved formula appears on the market, often lacking the most important thing: the balance of natural ingredients. Instead of real action, a promise. Instead of roots and leaves, capsules in beautiful packaging. But the body feels the difference, because you can't fool nature. There is a term called legislative washout. This is when nothing is formally prohibited, but conditions are created under which a drug disappears on its own. This is exactly what is happening today with natural medicine, and if we do not intervene, tomorrow we may be left alone with pills, forgetting that the earth gave us everything we need for healing. To understand why natural medicines are disappearing, we need to look at the very essence of modern pharmaceuticals. On the surface, everything seems simple. There are diseases, so we need medicines. But behind this facade lies a harsh reality. Medicines are first and foremost a commodity. And like any commodity, they are subject to market forces. At the heart of these forces is the patent. A patent is a legal construct that allows a monopoly on the production of a specific drug. While the patent is in force, no other company can manufacture or sell that drug without the owner's consent. This means that its price can be tens of times higher than its cost price, and the manufacturer can make billions in profits. But natural medicines cannot be patented. You cannot patent St. John's wort, turmeric, or black cumin. They exist in nature and have been known to mankind for a long time. This means that they cannot be a source of exclusive profit. This is precisely where the fundamental conflict between natural medicine and the pharmaceutical business lies. Companies try to synthesize analogs of natural substances, change their structure to create a new compound that can be patented. A natural molecule is slightly modified, wrapped in attractive packaging, and sold under a new name. Advertising, marketing, medical conferences, and soon doctors are prescribing an innovative remedy, while its prototype was lying in a herbalist's medicine chest. This is how acetyl-salicylic acid appeared, a synthetic analog of willow bark, which had been used for centuries as a fever reducer, or digoxin, a derivative of foxglove, or pseudoephedrine, a modification of ma huang. In all these cases, pharmaceutical corporations used knowledge gained in folk medicine but adapted it to the patent model. This practice has been called biopiracy. It describes a process in which the traditional knowledge of indigenous peoples is used by large corporations without compensation, without mention of the source, and sometimes with a subsequent ban on the use of the plant itself. Such examples have been documented in India, the Amazon, and Africa. Take turmeric, for example. This spice has been known for thousands of years in Indian medicine as a powerful anti-inflammatory agent. But it was only after Western scientists discovered curcumin, the active ingredient in turmeric, that patented drugs appeared on the market. There was even an attempt to register a patent for turmeric itself, an attempt that was protested by India and was cancelled. But the essence remains. Companies want to monopolize what does not belong to them. Similar stories are multiplying. An Amazonian tribe used the bark of a certain tree to treat infections. A pharmaceutical company extracts a substance from it, patents it, and now even the indigenous people themselves cannot sell or use it officially. This is not just exploitation, it is legalizing theft. But in the eyes of the law, everything is above board. Because it is registered. Because it is scientifically proven. Against this backdrop, natural medicine is losing on all fronts. It has no defenders in patent offices. It has no investors willing to pour millions into registering an old herb. It has no lobbyists capable of pushing through the necessary wording. It is losing not because it is worse. It is losing because it does not fit into the business model. Pharmacology requires novelty. Every new drug must be unique. Otherwise, there will be no patent, no profit. Therefore, even if an effective remedy already exists in nature, it must be improved, changed, recoded. And often, it is precisely in the process of improvement that side effects appear. Complex chemistry, poorly understood interactions, cumulative toxic effects. But that doesn't stop the market. The main thing is that there is a patent. That means it can be sold. Natural products are often safer, but this is precisely why they are less interesting. They have fewer side effects, which means less need for antidotes and additional drugs. They work gently and do not require aggressive therapy. This means that they do not stimulate demand for additional drugs. This is a threat to an industry built on repeat sales. Amazing things are happening within the system itself. The same substance can be considered unsafe if it comes from a plant, and useful if it is synthesized. Take melatonin, for example. In the United States, it can be bought as a supplement, while in Europe it is regulated as a medicine. In some countries, it is completely banned without a prescription. Why? The answer lies not in pharmacokinetics, but in patent policy. Thus, we see not just scientific rivalry, but an economic war. Nature is a free source. Pharmacology is a system of control. And everything that cannot be controlled is declared unsafe, untested, outside the standards. This is how the squeeze works. Is it possible to preserve natural medicine in such a system? Perhaps. But this requires a new approach. Not a business approach, but a public one. Not a market approach, but a cultural one. Until this happens, synthetics will prevail. Not because of their effectiveness, but because of their ownership. Not because of their usefulness, but because of money. To understand why natural medicine is being pushed out, we need to look at the mechanism that has long turned healthcare into a field of global influence. This is the pharma lobby. This term refers to a coordinated system of influence exerted by pharmaceutical corporations on doctors, regulators, the media, scientific journals, and even educational institutions. And although the word itself sounds like something out of a conspiracy theory, it is in fact an institutionalized reality. Pharmaceutical companies are among the 10 largest corporations in the world in terms of market capitalization. Their budgets are comparable to those of entire countries. A single major player can spend up to $10 billion a year on promotion. This includes not only advertising, but also lobbying regulatory bodies, funding research, granting grants to universities, and maintaining representatives in parliaments. Officially, pharmaceutical lobbying is not considered illegal. It is protecting the interests of the industry. In practice, however, this protection means lobbying for laws that benefit big players and harm alternative forms of medicine. For example, in some countries, natural medicines cannot be sold without clinical trials, which cost millions. Who can afford that? Only a large corporation. It is the pharmaceutical lobby that insists on standardization, supposedly for patient protection. But these standards are formulated in such a way that everything natural is left out. Unstable concentrations of substances, complex dosages, lack of patent protection. As a result, herbs and natural tinctures are automatically excluded from the lists of approved drugs. In the 1990s, the United States passed the so-called Health Care and Education Act, supported by the industry's biggest players. It required doctors to be certified only by programs approved by pharmaceutical associations. As a result, all forms of alternative therapy disappeared from training courses. A young doctor can graduate from a prestigious university without ever hearing a lecture on the medicinal properties of mint, calendula, or birch. One of the main tools of the pharmaceutical lobby is clinical research. This is a powerful and authoritative tool that can scientifically prove anything. But how are most of these studies conducted? They are funded by companies with a vested interest in a specific outcome. For example, a study might compare the effects of a plant extract and a new synthetic drug. The methodology is designed so that the plant-based remedy is doomed to fail. Underdosed, unsuitable form of administration, no comprehensive evaluation. In addition, many studies are simply not published if the results do not suit the sponsor. This is called publication bias, the systematic distortion of the scientific picture due to the concealment of unfavorable data. And again, who suffers? Natural products that do not have a budget for promotion. The media also play a role in relaying pressure. Corporations work directly with editors, pay for content, and promote their agenda. A note about a new miracle drug may be part of an advertising campaign. An article about the harmful effects of herbs may be a calculated blow to competitors. Consumers cannot distinguish between a scientific publication and a promotional article. They simply lose trust in natural remedies. The pharmaceutical lobby also infiltrates regulatory bodies. In a number of countries, former top managers of pharmaceutical companies hold key positions in government health agencies. They promote initiatives aimed at improving safety, which in reality complicate or block the circulation of natural medicines. There are also more subtle forms of pressure. For example, research grants are only awarded to scientists who work within the framework of official science. If you are involved in the study of traditional medicine, you have almost no chance of receiving funding. Universities are beholden to their sponsors, which means they block topics that are not profitable for corporations. Consensus building also plays a huge role. This is when expert councils are created, white papers are written, and recommendations are formulated. The same companies are behind these processes. Consensus is created artificially so that it can later be referred to as conventional wisdom. This is how natural medicine ends up outside the box, outside the format, outside the acceptable. This is not theory. These are established mechanisms, confirmed by research, court cases, and leaks of internal documents. The problem is not that pharmaceutical companies are evil. The problem is that their interests are directly opposed to those of natural medicine. And in this struggle, herbs, tinctures, and roots have almost no resources. They cannot buy MPs. They cannot hire teams of lawyers. They cannot pay for primetime advertising. Their defense is the trust of the people. Their strength lies in the knowledge passed down from generation to generation. But if this knowledge is suppressed, blocked, or destroyed, there will be nothing left. And in its place will be only what has been patented, synthesized, and approved by those who profit from it. There are forgotten pages in the history of the medical struggle for dominance. How those who went against the official medical establishment were persecuted, discredited, and even arrested. Naturopaths, homeopaths, healers, and herbalists, anyone who used natural approaches to treatment, were regularly persecuted. It was not just a struggle for standards. It was a struggle for power, for control over the human body and mind. Naturopathy as a discipline emerged in Europe in the 19th century. It is based on the idea of self-healing through natural mechanisms, nutrition, exercise, herbs, and cleansing. At first, it was received with interest, especially in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. But with the growing influence of chemical pharmacology, naturopathy began to be systematically suppressed. Doctors who practiced it had their licenses revoked, their clinics were closed, and their books were removed from libraries. Homeopathy suffered a similar fate. The system proposed by Samuel Hahnemann in the late 18th century claimed that like cures like, and used ultra-small doses of substances that activate the body's internal forces. It was popular in Europe and America until the early 20th century. There were more than 20 large homeopathic colleges in the United States, and dozens of hospitals treated patients exclusively using homeopathic methods. However, at the beginning of the 20th century, a massive attack on alternative medicine began. In 1910, the so-called Flexner Report, funded by the Rockefeller and Carnegie Foundations, was published in the United States. This document radically changed medical education. Schools that did not conform to the scientific paradigm were deemed ineffective. The result was the closure of most homeopathic, naturopathic, and osteopathic schools. The Flexner Report is considered a watershed moment in the history of American medicine. It established a model in which allopathy, the suppression of symptoms with chemical agents, was recognized as the only acceptable approach to treatment. All other approaches were declared unscientific. From that moment on, natural medicine began to disappear, not only from store shelves, but also from textbooks. In European countries, the situation did not develop as sharply, but with the same result. In France, homeopathy was officially recognized, but its systematic marginalization began at the end of the 20th century. In the United Kingdom, state clinics where homeopaths practiced were gradually closed. In Germany, in the 21st century, a ban on homeopathic medicines in state-funded pharmacies was introduced. All this took place against a backdrop of pressure from the pharmaceutical lobby and scientific councils sponsored by large companies. In a number of countries, practicing alternative medicine has become dangerous. In Australia, naturopaths face the risk of prosecution for recommendations that do not comply with official protocols. In Canada, there have been cases where herbalists have been investigated. In India and Latin America, traditional medicine is being pushed into the illegal sphere. The issue of information was particularly acute. Works on phytotherapy and naturopathy disappeared from libraries and educational institutions. Natural practices are censored on the internet. Videos are deleted. Websites are banned, and channels are blocked. Under the pretext of combating misinformation, resources where thousands of people shared their experiences of treatment with herbs, oils, and breathing techniques are being shut down. Medical associations publish lists of pseudo-scientific methods, which include not only outright quackery, but also traditional methods that have been proven over centuries. This category includes leeches, acupuncture, and even herbal baths. The problem is not their effectiveness. The problem is that there is no industry behind them. Naturopaths around the world are forming associations in an attempt to defend their right to exist. But in most cases, they do not have the resources to fight the state and corporate machines. Licenses are revoked, practices are outlawed, and patients are intimidated. They are told that if they do not follow the protocol, they are putting themselves at risk. If a doctor uses an unproven method, they are a criminal. This is how tradition is destroyed. Not immediately, not in a single moment, but slowly, step by step. Articles are removed. Curricula are changed. Books disappear. Schools are closed. Fear is instilled. As a result, a generation grows up believing that everything natural is nonsense, old wives' tales, something dangerous and dubious. But there are still people who preserve knowledge. Writers, doctors, healers, bloggers who pass on recipes, preserve archives, and record lectures. This resistance is quiet but persistent. Because the truth does not need advertising, it simply continues to live, despite everything. Sometimes natural remedies disappear, not because of propaganda or pressure from the pharmaceutical lobby. They disappear because the law says so, and often not directly. The ban may be disguised as safety concerns, raising standards, or the need for certification, but the result is the same. A plant that has been used for centuries suddenly becomes illegal, and anyone who decides to use it is outside the law. One of the main tools of this process is so-called sanitary regulations and technical barriers. In European Union countries, there is a regulation that any herbal remedy must be registered as a medicine or food product with medicinal properties. This means research, standards, and documentation are required. But who will pay for the registration of mint, chamomile, yarrow? No one. It is not profitable. Therefore, they are disappearing, not as plants, but as commodities. In the United Kingdom, a directive came into force in 2011 banning dozens of traditional herbal remedies. Formally, this was due to non-compliance with new standards. In reality, it was because small producers were unable to navigate the complex and expensive certification process. Licorice root, calendula, elecampane, burdock, birch, and other plants that have been used in medicine for centuries were hit hard. The situation is slightly different in the United States. Here, the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, has the authority to classify substances as new unproven drugs if they have not been officially registered by a certain date. Even if a substance has been used for centuries, the lack of documentation makes it suspicious and, as a result, illegal to sell. In addition, the FDA actively combats what it calls unapproved claims of therapeutic properties. If a manufacturer of dandelion root tea writes on the packaging that it supports the liver, this could be considered an illegal medical claim. Penalty: a fine. Ban: confiscation of the batch. This leads to absurdity. Everyone knows that chamomile has a calming effect, but the manufacturer has no right to write this because it has not been officially registered as a medicine. Against the backdrop of these bans, the influence of international organizations is growing. In particular, the WHO and Codex Alimentarius. The latter, created with the participation of the UN and WHO, is responsible for setting global standards for products and food additives. In practice, this means that if a herb is not included in the Codex register, it can be outlawed in a number of countries, even if it is safe and effective. This creates a situation in which the boundaries of human rights to health are blurred. People lose their right to choose. Want to drink motherwort tincture? Make sure it is certified. If not, you are breaking the law. Want to sell a blueberry leaf extract? Get a license, laboratory confirmation, and a toxicologist's report. Can't do it? Ban it. Business is closed. The product is outlawed. Many countries in Asia and Africa have begun to introduce laws that copy Western standards. As a result, local healers who have been working for decades have found themselves outside the law. In Indonesia, there have been arrests for illegal medical practice. In Nigeria, herbal markets are being destroyed. In Brazil, Criminal cases are being brought against people for making tinctures without a license. All this is being done under the guise of consumer protection. But who are these laws really protecting? The patient or the market? Legislation is becoming a tool of control. And control is a tool for suppressing competition. After all, no one is banning synthetic substances with side effects that have been formally approved. But natural preparations without a patent are under threat. Sometimes it reaches the point of absurdity. In Germany, there have been attempts to restrict the sale of water with silver. In Canada, there has been discussion of banning high doses of vitamin D without a prescription. In Australia, essential oils have been banned because they are allegedly unpredictable in their effects. All of this is the result of a single logic. You can only control what is formalized. But nature cannot be formalized. It is diverse. It changes with the seasons, with the region, with the method of collection. It cannot be fit into tables and norms, and that is precisely why it is becoming a target of pressure. Because it is uncontrollable. Because it belongs to no one. Because it is free. Lawyers and activists advocating for freedom of therapy call this process the silent criminalization of nature. It is not a direct ban. It is a regulation, an instruction, a list of requirements that cannot be met without millions in investment. And the result is the same silence on the shelves, the same inability to buy a simple remedy, the same confusion for patients. But there is another side to the law. It can be changed. Under pressure from society, doctors, patients. There are already precedents. In a number of countries, the right to use traditional plants has been upheld. Registers of folk remedies are being created. Cooperatives are opening. Dialogue with regulators is underway. And this is hope. Hope that not all doors are closed, and that nature can still return, not to the market, but to our lives. We are led to believe that natural medicine is a thing of the past, that the future belongs to digital technologies, bioengineering, gene therapy, and pills created on the basis of artificial intelligence. We are being prepared for a world where health is a subscription, where diagnoses are made by algorithms and treatment is a product delivered by a logistics system based on big data. But in this digital paradise, there is less and less room for nature. Every year, medicine becomes more standardized. Electronic records, protocols, template diagnoses. It's convenient, but it's also dangerous. Because the individual approach is disappearing. Because there is no place in these templates for herbs, tinctures, or old recipes passed down through generations. Algorithms do not recognize what cannot be formalized, and that means it disappears. A revolution is underway. But it is not a revolution of knowledge. It is a revolution of control. The doctor becomes an operator, the patient becomes a number, and treatment becomes a service. Everything is strict. Everything is recorded. Everything is under control. And if in this system you suddenly want to brew yourself a decoction from burdock root, you become a violator. Or, at the very least, a person outside the protocol. Technology promises us immortality, but this immortality is not natural. It comes from a laboratory, from a patent, from a company. And the more we depend on these solutions, the less we trust ourselves. we are losing not only our knowledge of herbs, we are losing trust in our own bodies. But there is also a counter-movement. More and more people are beginning to ask questions. Why do I have to take 5 medications when chamomile used to be enough? Why has my body become foreign to the system? Why is the doctor afraid to recommend what he uses at home? There is growing interest in ancient knowledge. People are returning to herbal medicine, breathing practices, and working with the body. This is not a rejection of science. It is an attempt to restore balance. In the West, cooperatives are emerging that are reviving old recipes. In Asia and South America, schools are opening that teach not only medicine, but also respect for nature. The Internet, which until recently was used to suppress alternatives, is becoming a weapon in the hands of educators. People are sharing recipes. They are recording videos. They are writing articles. The digital revolution could work against the monopolies themselves if knowledge becomes the property of all. But time is running out. Every generation is a lost opportunity if we do not pass on knowledge. There will come a point of no return when memory will be erased, and it will be impossible to bring it back. Already today, children do not know what St. John's wort looks like. Tomorrow, they will not know what linden tea is. The day after tomorrow, it will not even occur to them that you can treat yourself without a prescription. This is not just a cultural loss. It is a loss of autonomy, a loss of the right to health, a loss of connection to the land. But we still have a chance. While the grass is still growing, while there are still those who remember, while someone, somewhere, is drying mint, writing recipes, burying valerian root in the ground to give to their grandchildren. Natural medicine is not just a method. It is a language. It is a connection. It is freedom. And if we want to preserve it, we need to talk about it, remember it, and share it. Because in a world where everything is for sale, knowledge that cannot be bought is the most valuable thing there is.